Hi there, welcome back to Spring Into Math 7. I'm Mrs. Campbell, and today we're going to be doing a review of some of the concepts we've covered so far. Let's get started. Okay, so the first thing I want to give you a chance to do is review what we've learned about adding and subtracting integers. So if you don't remember how to add and subtract integers, feel free to go back to those two videos and refresh your memory. Then grab a piece of scratch paper and a pencil and give these 8 questions a try. Okay, how'd you do? Let's take a look at our problems here. The first one we have is very easy. 7 plus 2, obviously, 9. What did you get for 7 plus negative 2? Think of a number line if you need to. Start on 7 and move back 2. So that gives us 5. Negative 7 plus 2 will give us a negative 5. Negative 7 plus negative 2. Again, think of that number line. You're going to be moving farther back. So you've got negative 7 plus negative 2 is going to give us negative 9. 7 minus 2, not very hard at all. 7 minus 2 is going to be 5. 7 minus negative 2, remember all we need to do is make our subtraction sign a plus sign and change the sign of this negative 2 to a positive 2, and we have 7 plus 2, which gives us 9. That's called the opposite property, and it tells us that if we just need to change the subtraction sign to an addition sign and change the negative to a positive. And then we have negative 7 minus 2, again, add the opposite, and we get negative 9. And we have negative 7 minus negative 2, again, opposite rule, and we have negative 7 plus positive 2, and that gives us negative 5. I'm sure you did a great job. If you need to, practice more problems that are looking at adding and subtracting integers. All right, let's move on. All right, the other thing that I want to take a minute to discuss is absolute value. That was one of our first videos, and I just wanted to remind you that absolute value is where the question is asking you how far a number is away from 0 on a number line. And you know that they're asking for the absolute value when you see these long parallel lines on either side of the number. So this particular question is asking us, what is the absolute value of negative 5? Now, all that's asking you is how many units away from 0 is that number? And the absolute value of negative 5 is 5. So just wanted to take a minute to kind of review that concept. Okay, knowing about absolute value is also going to be really helpful for us when we're adding and subtracting integers that are higher. So let's take a look at one of these problems using absolute value to add and subtract integers. Our problem is negative 7 plus 2. Okay, so if you didn't want to use a number line, you could use absolute value. And the way to do that is you subtract the number with the smaller absolute value, and that would be negative 2, from the number with the greater, that was positive 2, from the number with the greater absolute value, in this case, negative 7. Negative 7 is farther away from 0 on a number line than 2, so that has the greater absolute value. We simply subtract those two numbers, 7 minus 2, which gives us 5. And then the last part of using absolute value when we're adding and subtracting integers is to give your answer the sign of the number with the highest absolute value. In this case, the number with the highest absolute value was negative 7. So our answer is going to have a negative as well. Okay, and I just wanted to take a second also to point out, don't panic if you ever come across a problem that asks you to add or subtract negative decimals or fractions. They really operate the same way as positive and negative whole numbers. You just need to remember, like for example on this problem, to incorporate the decimal components as well. And in this problem, we would just add the two negative numbers as we would if they were whole numbers. So for this problem, we have negative 3.5 plus negative 5.7 equals negative 9.2. When we're adding and subtracting with negative decimals and fractions, there's a couple things that we need to remember. Especially when we're adding and subtracting fractions, we need to remember that we always have to have a common denominator. So I thought it would be a good idea to take a look at a problem like this and just kind of review. So the problem we have here is negative 3/4 plus 5/12. Now remember, when you're adding and subtracting fractions, you always have to have a common denominator. Well, this one's actually going to be pretty easy because 12 is there. We know that 3 goes into 12. So our common denominator is going to be 12. So our 5/12, we don't have to do anything to that. It can stay exactly the same. But our negative 3/4, to find the common denominator, we're going to have to multiply the 3 and the 4 by the negative 3 and 4 by 3 as well to get our common denominator of 12. And remember, whatever you do to the denominator, you've got to do to the numerator as well. All right, that's pretty much all you have to do as far as finding a common denominator. Then you simply add negative 9 plus 5, and if you know how to add integers, that shouldn't be a problem for you. So you have negative 9 plus 5, which gives us negative 4. The denominator will be 12, and then we simply reduce to negative 1/3. Now, sometimes you may come across a situation where a problem is giving you both a fraction and a decimal. Don't panic. All you have to do is choose one or the other. I personally like to work with decimals. Some people prefer fractions. I did work this problem out in fraction format, though, just so you can see how it's done. Okay, so the problem is negative 5/6 plus 2.5. So the first thing you want to do is take this 2.5 and turn it into a fraction. So 2.5, that's actually pretty simple, is going to be 2.5. So now my problem reads negative 5/6 over 2.5. But that's still not going to be very easy to work with because 2.5 is a mixed number. It'll be easier to work with an improper fraction. So I turn 2.5 into 5 over 2. So now my problem reads negative 5/6 plus 5 over 2. All right, once again, I'm going to have to find that common denominator because I'm adding fractions. Our common denominator is going to be 6. We've got negative 5/6. And remember, anything I do to the denominator, so my 2 is going to get multiplied by 3, so my 5 is going to have to be multiplied by 3 as well. And then I simply multiply to find out what my new fraction is when I get my common denominator, 6. And my problem now reads negative 5/6 plus 15 over 6. And now we're just back to adding integers. Now you're looking at adding negative 5 plus 15 over 6. You could do that on a number line. You could do that using absolute value. It's actually not too hard to determine. A negative 5 plus 15 is going to be 10. 10/6. So that is an improper fraction because our numerator is larger than our denominator. And when we come into a situation like that, it's always a good idea to turn your improper fraction into a mixed number. And when we do that, we get 1 4/6. Am I done yet? Nope, because that's not simplified. 1 4/6 can be reduced to 1 2/3. All right, guys, that just about does it for our review. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.